some of those day-to-day things on how you actually just run your life on a day-to-day business, a day-to-day basis. I've noticed Adrian Gore told a friend of mine when he had 30 minutes with him that you can only do 3 things very well and you must give away everything else. That's what his advice was. And you just do 3 things. I'd like to hear some wisdom from your side then on that side as well then. Yeah, but we'll get it. Yeah. Cool. Welcome to TIA Talks. I'm Jason, your host, and this is the place where we start having the conversation that hopefully will bring some change in the industry that we love so much. Today, I've got Chris Appanah and Peter Olyott. That's right, eh? Yeah. Perfect. It's so amazing to have special guests, and this is why it's special, because I've got a broker again, and I think it's so biased that I can get these guys on this show. So I'm really chuffed that I've got a broker and we can represent our side of the industry. Yeah. And I've got somebody who's climbed the corporate ladder. Chris, you've done very well in your career. I would say pre-X winner. I don't want to say X winner because you've won it, of TIA. Chris, I'm going to start with you. Maybe you can just give us a little bit of background of what you do in the industry and your role. And also just maybe go into a little bit of your story.
Okay, so I work at Bright Insurance, and I'm currently, or recently, as of the 1st of October, then the reinsurance manager. I transitioned into that role from being previously the head of claims, liabilities, recoveries, and salvage. Prior to that, I worked at various other, UMAs and insurers in a claims capacity. Yeah. in a claims capacity. So claims has been my life up until now, where I am going into a completely different direction.
Yeah, sure.
I'm looking forward to that particular challenge. From a story point of view, what do you want to know?
Particularly how maybe, TIA, you're a winner.
Yeah.
You've won the competition, something that I didn't do. And, I look up to the winners of the past, but one of the big players or role players or role models in my life for the last 2 years has been you.
Oh, wow.
And you've been a real inspiration to me, just even in entering. You coached me right in the beginning. You helped me a little bit along the way on my journey. Yeah. And I just appreciated your wisdom, and I think TIA has contributed to a lot of your success, in your career and probably in your personal life too. I don't know, now that you're famous. So I don't know what maybe from a TIA point of view, how has that impacted you?
So I've actually gotten this question many times. Yeah. How has TIA and winning it impacted your career and your career trajectory? So the thing is, it's the way I explain it is that the reason why I entered was not to climb the corporate ladder, if anything. It was to get into or to start leveraging that platform for the promotion of the insurance space. Because before I joined, I knew nothing about insurance. I literally fell into insurance, which is a whole other story by itself. So, I leveraged the platform of TIA to start pushing another agenda, which was talent development, attraction, youth development within the insurance space. How it helped me in my career, though, was a different subset of that. And it actually came I was very unprepared for that, for what it did for me as an individual or professional. It really just, I suppose, validated that I actually
that you're amazing.
Yeah. But it validated all of that. It validated all of those insecurities that I thought I had, or that these myths, these things that I didn't have evidence for.
Yeah.
And instead, it gave me evidence of the fact that I was a good leader. I was able to speak. I was able to think on my feet. I was articulate. You
could back yourself now.
I could 100% back myself.
Sure.
And the conversations I had after that were much more richer. Instead of me sitting there in a conversation and thinking about, how is this person deceiving me? How am I saying the right thing?
It makes you more self-aware.
Do I have to sit up and that sort of thing? Now there's a sense of calmness, coolness, and
You come across cool and calm most of the time. So, I mean, that's awesome. I think for me, it was also a lot of self-awareness. You know, it just made me more aware of conversations that I'm having. I mean, so your career has gone on for a short while. It hasn't been as long as Peter's. Peter, you've been in the industry for a long time.
Yes, BTIA.
Before TIA. Yes. I love it. Okay, so TIA is the benchmark now for time in the industry. Yeah. I think that's brilliant. Okay, we'll do that. Peter, it's awesome to have you on the show. You are the CEO of Willis. Yep. Maybe give us a bit of background on what your role is in the industry and also at your business.
Okay, so I have a number of roles. Yeah. I'm also on the board of the FIA, which is the Financial Intermediaries Association. Also on the board of the Insurance Institute of South Africa, where I'm responsible for professionalism and professional codes and conducts, and also to try and promote the institute. So my story begins as an insurance company. I started with Mutual and Federal, moved on to Fedshaw, which then became the predecessor to Hollard. Did that for 7 years and then converted to being a broker. Started right at the bottom, so the then Price Forbes employed me on a trainee program. So for 2 years, I just attended programs, courses, etc. And I remember that then MD Mike Hoffmeyer used to see me at all these programs and asked if I didn't have a job because I just attended
just
these
trained.
programs. But in hindsight, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
I really got exposed to technical detail, which is really important from an advisor point of view. I then started my career at Alexander Forbes, or Price Forbes as it was then, all of 1 year, and they promoted me to some sort of assistant manager in Nelspruit. And they couldn't go any further east at that stage. They didn't have offices in Maputo, so that's where I stayed. Then I thought after 2 years, I've been here too long, I need to get back. Started pushing them, and they said, well, got a great job for you, new business. So I got a little office between the kitchen and the boardroom. And actually, in hindsight, it turned out to be, that's what started my career. I just fell with my bum in the butter, so to speak.
Sure.
Had many wins, mainly in the telecommunications sector, and that set me up for my career, basically.
Sure. How long have you been in the industry now?
I've been 35 years as a broker.
35 years as a broker?
Yeah.
I'm 34 years old. Yeah, it's okay. So you can teach me a lot after this conversation, please, and hopefully a little bit.
You can probably also teach me. So that's one thing I've learned is you never stop learning.
Okay.
The other thing that I always promote to anyone who cares to listen is, if you're in this industry, you owe it to yourself and to your clients to know your subject inside out, back to front, upside down, because your advice can ruin lives.
Yeah, bottom line.
On the individual, if I give you the wrong advice, you never recover and you'll be forever in debt.
Yeah.
If you're a business, your factory burns down, you never rebuild, and 1,000 people lose their jobs.
Sure. Yeah, so important.
So that's why it's important to know what you're speaking about. The other thing which has really been great is the benefit of hindsight. With hindsight, I would have learned risk first, risk management, and then insurance. Because I don't think a lot of guys don't sell insurance properly.
That's interesting though, because we're moving almost as an advice space to a risk management space.
Yeah.
I've seen it almost from the corporate brokers. They've got almost a whole risk management department that they'll put together. Is that kind of what you're seeing in the industry?
Yes.
We're moving towards a risk management space?
Yeah, look, I mean, insurance is just one means of financing risk.
Yeah.
People don't understand how it works, but it's actually quite an expensive form of finance for losses that are going to happen. But for catastrophe losses, which seldom occur, it's the best form of finance. So if you marry that together, you're more likely to give your client the right advice.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is risks are becoming integrated into each other. So it's very difficult to separate risks. So people talk of climate change and how climate change affects other risks. And so it becomes quite a complex thing. So I think in my generation, we were brought up as generalists. And these days you need to be a specialist because it's virtually impossible to be an expert at everything across all sectors. So not only line of business, but also sectoral. So a manufacturing risk is different to a retail risk, is different to an advice, like an IT risk.
Yeah.
And, especially in the younger generation, it pays to specialize in one of those sectors and also the classes of insurance.
Yeah, that's amazing because I specialized, funny enough, I did my CFP to do, life and investments and medical and stuff. But I fell into the short-term space first. And that built my business. You know, over the last 10 years, I've built a business that pays me every month, which is awesome, but I've done it the other way. And I've found that a lot of guys that enter the industry go to the advice space and they go to the long-term space where they're missing a massive opportunity on the short-term side, just as a broker, and speaking of opportunities just in the industry, Chris, there are many opportunities out there, and you've grasped them with both hands. We spoke a little bit about what I could maybe teach you in terms of what's happened in the last maybe 2 years. But in those couple of years that we've come out of COVID and those type of things, we've adapted our businesses. We've changed a lot in the ways that we've learned the way that we do things. Our processes have changed. Some of it's been automated. How is kind of career development, putting yourself out there, making sure that you can actually have a bit of a career and grow yourself? How do you grow yourself in this post-COVID world? Because it's a very different world. And my question actually relates more around mentorship specifically, because before we had mentors that were in the office. Now it's a bit of a mix, and I prefer going to the office. I go every single morning just to be face to face with people. And then when my two business partners are there, they can teach me whatever. And I went into their office this morning, and I said to them, how do I do this? How do I put this risk together? Because and they could tell me immediately. How has it changed? And maybe what are the new ways that we can help young guys kind of learn and grow in this industry now?
So I don't think much has changed when it comes to the context of your question post-COVID. I think the principles are more or less still the same. I learned through my career, and obviously being part of various industry initiatives like the IIG, for example, the Roots and Wings program. There's a lovely facilitator, two facilitators, Linda and Jenna. And they speak about this pie chart where your forward progression is determined by three things primarily. So your performance, your image, and your exposure, right? So performance and image occupy half of that pie.
You've got image down.
Yeah.
Okay. The fade. I'm pretty sure you got your haircut this morning.
In preparation for this.
Anyway, image, continue, please.
So image and performance, right? And those things are quite easy to understand. So image, how you look, how you smell, how you show up every single day, right? How are you presenting yourself to the world at large? Performance is how are you doing your daily job? So are you mediocre, satisfactory at best, or are you pushing to work harder or smarter, but, performing nonetheless? Exposure occupies the other half of the pie chart, and that speaks to your visibility. So who knows how you're showing up every day and what you're doing in terms of performance? And so your forward progression, in my view, and obviously based on that or that framework is largely, on how are you able to become visible in the spaces that you want to play in at some point in your career. And so that's the sort of strategy that I've been advocating for people to understand, because you get employees who sit back and think, I've been working so hard, but why is that guy sitting where he's sitting? He's not great. I mean, we've all been there. We've all said that at some point or another. How did he get there? The fact of the matter is he's just learned how to jig the game in his favor. And so those principles will never change, I don't think, in our lifetime. And it's about really getting good at exposing what you are doing to a curated audience.
Sure.
To the audience you want to see the things that you're doing.
I think exposure is so key. I mean, I've seen it in my business. I mean, we have to put ourselves out there, Peter, just to get a client that'll pay for our kids' schooling. I think it's interesting what you've said there, because on my journey with TIA, it's given me a lot of exposure just to have conversations with you guys. I would have never met you without it, but I put myself out there to do it. And I think we all have in some way put ourselves out there to get to where we are at the moment. Peter, how did your journey look, in terms of the difficulty to get to where you are at the moment? Because I know it's a hard journey.
Well, I was an overnight success. It only took me 10 years before I started moving up.
Yeah, sure. Wow.
But once I started to move, I did
groundwork for
quickly.
10 years. Eh?
Yeah.
Sure.
And I did things that lots of people didn't want to do. So no one liked to do new business. I'm an introvert, by the way.
Sure.
So as soon as you say, well, you must do new business, I did
a
it
podcast.
Because, or a podcast. I did it because I realized it would have to stretch me. I was fortunate in that, in the 2 years that I did it, we had some major successes, and that put me on the map as far as the company was concerned. I then started taking over a division. And at that stage, I was a lot younger than any of the guys that reported to me, and they earned more money
difficult,
than me, which made it quite difficult. But eventually, we got through it, and I then took all the opportunities that I think were given to me. But I did work hard, probably excessively so. I wouldn't recommend that to everyone.
How hard? Tell us how hard.
Well, 7 days a week till 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, come on. Sunday's my rest day. Come on.
Yeah.
Wow.
But eventually I got over that, and I've sort of streamlined.
When did you
my
realize
life
that? Because my business partners, I think they are, they've been around for also about 30 years.
Yeah.
And they kind of, they almost they've slowed down only, I would say, in the last 3. So COVID kind of taught them they could use their phones a little bit on the beach and stuff like that.
COVID helped as well.
Yeah,
of course, because
you needed
it just
to slow
changed
down.
the way that we did work. But I mean, to the point of learning. So we were politically incorrectly termed bag carriers when I started, which meant you carried all the files, you kept your mouth shut, and you listened to your boss doing the thing. And then when you got back to the office, you could ask all the questions you wanted to. And that's how you learned. Oh. So you learned from different people. So my mentor, Martin, was a great people's person. He could walk in and within 5 minutes, he knows your kids' names, the dogs' names or whatever. And I just wanted to get down to business. And he taught me, deal with people first. And I think that's another thing in terms of recruiting people is we used to look at IQ and your qualifications and all that, which is great. But in our business, EQ is
trumps
more, trumps. And so you need to have a high level of EQ, above average IQ, but not rocket scientist.
About 120 is okay.
And if you have those connections, then you'll do well, I think, in our business. So those are the things that I learned. But I think the key differentiator was I said, well, if I'm going to be an advisor, I want to be the best advisor in terms of knowing my products. So I hate to admit this now, but I kind of learned this stuff off by heart. So I used to impress people because I could
fire, lightning, hailstorm,
all this type of stuff. But I did it because it helped me gain confidence being an introvert.
Yeah, excellent.
So that's how I did it.
Yeah, it's amazing how preparation can change the game often. If you just prepare enough. Especially in that instance. I mean, if you just know your product as a broker or as an advisor, you've done most of the job. A client can ask you anything and you can refer back to the policy wording or refer them back. But then what value do you add?
Yes.
It's amazing. In terms of EQ, because you brought up EQ, and I love that because it's the rage now. Everyone's talking about EQ, I find that we are in a society where we're all on our phones and we've cut relationships quite a lot. And since COVID, we've obviously done it on a personal level as well as a professional level. How does one actually develop their EQ over time in their career and in their business? And Peter, I think I'm going to ask you and then jump to Chris if you want to add.
Okay.
Sure.
As an introvert.
As an introvert, but I do think that, aren't you an introvert too, Chris? I don't know.
I've actually had this conversation with a coach of mine, and I think I'm an extrovert. I'm 100% an extrovert. Okay. I have moments where I have introverted tendencies, but on the whole, or in the majority, I'm an extrovert.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So to get back to your question on emotional intelligence, is to actually understand what it is. So I'll give you an analogy. When people come to me and they talk about AI, it's the buzzword. Throw AI. I said to them, well, when I last looked, there was 9 forms of intelligence. Which one are you talking about? And then suddenly you get the distant look and my friend across the room when they depart. because EQ is one of the forms of
every time
intelligence.
I write the email on ChatGPT, it says, "I hope you're well." No EQ.
So it's just the art of learning how to relate to people, and people are different, and that's what makes it complicated. I remember when I was a young leader or manager, we all went to this program, Managing by Objectives, as though people are objects and you manage them. And it was only later on in life where I realized that you manage things and you lead people.
Wow.
And in order to do that, where you've got complexity and diversity, and in South Africa we really have generational, gender, ethnicity, cultural, and just people's view of life. So if you're going to use one style of leadership or management, you're going to come short. But it's quite complicated to lead people effectively if you don't understand who you're dealing with, because then you use the same approach for everyone. For some people it'll work, other people will say, pff. And what we find in the younger generation today is a bit different from our generation, where your boss was the boss and you respected that because they were the boss. Youngsters don't do that anymore. They think you're an idiot, you're an idiot.
You're an idiot,
So I think there, and it only took me probably about 20 years to learn that I'd been managing wrong.
Only.
And I had to change. And once I changed, it was, everything started to happen for me.
The fact that you adapted to that change and that you accepted that there needed to be change. That's your EQ telling you something.
Yes.
Sure.
Well, I had people that used to report to me and they would say to me, "We love your leadership style." And I'll say, "Well, I've observed you. You're a bit like Attila the Hun. I only want to hear one click." I'm saying, well, you must practice what you preach. If you like the way I lead you, why don't you lead your people? And it's about maturity. So people used to say, well, you have to listen to me because I'm the boss. That's the worst possible thing you can say. And it's about empowering. So now I see my role as slightly different. I see it as walking around with a bunch of keys, trying to unlock the potential in people that they don't realize themselves. A lot of people are limited by their own thinking and their heart. Didn't go to the right school, didn't have the right education, etc., etc. Till I say to them, you could actually be anything you want to be. You must just believe it and want it. And then if you do those two things, then I can help you.
Wow. That was amazing, Peter. It was really insightful. Chris, what is your take on just EQ and building relationships in general?
So I find it so fascinating that Peter spoke about relationships and, having that level of EQ and constantly working on it. Because recently I had a conversation with the CEO at my company. And
that's Bright, by the way.
Yeah. And I asked him, because he was recently appointed to the CEO position and he was elevated above his colleagues at the time. And I asked him, how are you managing that transition? Because now these were effectively your friends who now have to report into you. And he said the key was building an awesome relationship, foundational base for that relationship with those colleagues, to the point where that ascension or his ascension to CEO isn't felt as much by them, and he's able to relate to them on a more personal level, and conversations are much easier. So that was the trick for him. And Peter also touched on mentorship. So, and you asked it earlier on, and I never answered it, but so on the mentorship component, I think as young people, I've had this conversation at the FIA summit recently. As young people, we need to curate, right? And I've always, not always, I started believing in this in my 30s, when I turned 30, that you have to curate everything that you consume. And so you need to curate your mentors as well. So identify those people around you within the industry that have that thing that you want to learn from, and ask them.
Yeah.
Just ask them.
Sometimes identifying that thing can be difficult.
It is.
Even in today's world, I've struggled with it, my own identity and trying to figure out where I want to go in my career. I had a wobbly when I almost left my brokerage, then I stayed, I'm a partner there. Like, why would I want to leave? This like stuff happens, but we struggle with these things, and then we try and identify a path that we want to take. But often things just get in the way. And especially for youngsters in the industry, I've seen guys leave the industry. I've seen them just hit walls. There's some sharks out there that will just cut them. How does this, yeah, how do we kind of fix that?
Okay. I think the first thing is one has to be authentic. So although you have mentors and you take in what you learn from different people, you've got to be yourself. Otherwise, you find yourself coming unstuck. So authenticity is at the key of everything, I believe. But you can learn from people. So I used to absorb as much as I could from different people, and I learned to find that there were different people for different things I wanted to learn. I couldn't learn everything from one person.
Yeah.
That was the key. So I don't believe in only having one mentor. I look around and see what can I learn from different people. I even do it now because I'm firmly of the belief that you never stop learning.
Yeah.
If you want to stay ahead, you've got to learn and continue to learn, and you can learn from young people.
Yeah.
I do that for perspectives on the world because I know that my perspective is prejudiced by my own upbringing. I like to hear how young people think today.
Did you
because it
learn
helps
that
me.
before or after the big change in your leadership style?
After. I was definitely not a people's manager.
Yeah.
I learned by facts and performance, and people's personalities, and that was secondary.
Yeah.
Until I learned that actually that's the secret, is to unlock people's potential. Because then you learn a lot about yourself and you learn a lot about the people you work with.
Yeah. And then in terms of unlocking this potential, you've developed people over the last 30 years. In the last 30 years, how are the things, what are the things that have worked and what are the things that haven't in developing people's skills and careers, and what could we possibly do to help them now?
Teach people to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
That's all. Because the rest will follow. If they really believe and they want to do it, they will do it, provided you show them the belief and the trust that they have. And I don't think people are ready 100% of the time. So if they're 80% there, take a bit of a risk, drop them in the water, see if they swim. Most cases they do. But also allow them to be themselves. Because they can't be clones of me. I don't want them to be clones of me. That would be too terrible.
Introverted,
yeah, know it all.
Yeah, high IQ, EQ, CEO of whatever. Such a problem.
But I really enjoy watching people sort of blossom, because it's like watching someone that maybe wasn't that certain or of themselves suddenly blossom and do things.
So rewarding.
Yeah, it is. It's much more rewarding than, doing your profit, because if you don't do it, your corporation finds someone else who can.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as an issue. You have to do the job, but the job is so much more rewarding when you start influencing people's lives.
Yeah, that's so good.
Then it's great.
You've touched on kind of the fluff.
Yeah.
But there is a hard work element behind this always, which I think some youngsters and even myself has gone through, where I thought I could do it easier, I could do it smarter. I've tried to change it. At the end of the day, I've realized if I put the time in, and be productive, I will be productive, and the outcomes will be, it'll be linked to that hard work. You mentioned that you kind of have slowed down in terms of the work and in hours and those type of things, but I do feel that that's still a strong element of where we need to be, and guys that aspire to be you, they need to put that into their arsenal or their toolkit. How important is hard work actually at the end of the day?
I don't want to overemphasize it, but it is important.
Yeah.
I was always the first in the office and probably the last to leave, and not because I was trying to impress anyone. It's just I realized I had to put the time in, and you'll see that across anything, whether it's sport.
Yeah.
It's the people who put the hard yards in that make it to the top. And that's just because it isn't easy. And there's so many dimensions to what we do.
Yeah.
Apart from advising clients, you've got to support your staff members, which is also quite difficult. If you've got 30 people, you've got 30 different views on life, what's fair, what's unfair, how the industry should be. Yeah. So I think it takes a lot of dedication is one thing. So dedication is probably the key word. Whether it means 6 days a week or 10 hours or 20 hours, I think that's irrelevant, because that's dependent on the individual.
Yeah.
But to dedicate yourself, I love what I do, so I don't see it as being work. As people look at me and say, how can you love what you do? You like the Dr. Doom and Master of Disaster.
I'm sure we can all say we love what we do.
Yeah. But for me, it's more about if you give the right advice, your client recovers from the disaster.
Yeah.
If I look at, in the country in the last 4 years, floods, riots, load shedding, whatever, you don't need to tell people. You just say, this is what I do, and they know what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
But we played a pivotal role in getting the country back on its feet through our advice.
Yeah.
So that's a noble thing. When I first started in the industry, it was about car accidents and panel beaters.
It wasn't very noble.
Trucks.
Yeah.
You sort of spoke behind your hand when they said, what do you do? Because all my friends were like lawyers and advocates. And
you must have signed a deal on a tissue paper as well, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
No compliance.
We've done that,
Yeah.
Well, in our days, you sort of did the deal, and if it worked, you then complied. Now you do it the other way around. You spend 2 years complying, and it still might not work.
I love compliance, though. The regulator's doing a great job. I mean, but I'm sure you know them personally, so it's okay.
Yeah, look, it's part of the way the game is changing, and you have to.
Yeah.
But I think the other important thing was you were talking about the life side. Is that the artificial silos we've created have slowly started to fall away. So the gap between individual stuff on life, short term, remember, if I'm advising you, I have to take all of that into account.
Yeah.
And so I think those artificial silos are starting to move away for the next generation.
Yeah, very good.
And that includes in business as well. So I don't think there will be these defined areas of separation. Risk is risk, whether it's life or short term, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Chris, I usually end on this this kind of topic, but I think we've got enough time to actually explore it a little bit, because I can hear your hearts actually behind with what we're saying. You've got a heart to change lives. You've got a heart to impact where you are in your space. And I find that commendable. I really want to aspire to do the same, and I'm hoping to do that here. So the point of this podcast is to actually bring change in this industry and get guys thinking of how they could do it. Chris, I'll start with you, but your burden in this industry, what your heart resonates for, the yearning of change, that, if I could say, what is that to you, and what do you want to change in this industry, and how are you doing it at the moment, possibly, or how would you like to do it in the future? Because we've got listeners, and maybe someone wants to partner with you as well on this journey.
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, very loaded. But just let's talk about the emotional side.
Let me just start by
give a simple answer. Say yes.
It's coming for you, Peter. It's coming as well.
Let me present my dissertation here.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a lot of my journey, a lot of what's important to me, what I value in this industry, and what I want to change comes directly from my journey. I had a very tough start in the insurance space. Very, very tough start. In the sense that there was zero to little to no guidance. I mean, little to no guidance. Felt lost most of the time. I mean, I walked into rooms where I would not be greeted by the individuals that were sitting there. And it sucked. It really, really sucked. And I thought to myself, I don't want any young person who's excited to work in insurance to experience that, because I know it still happens. I've heard the horror stories, right? And then suddenly leave.
Yeah.
And then you have this gap that is growing in this amazing space. Like, I mean, I say the insurance makes the world go round. Without insurance, a lot of things would have stopped. Innovation would have stopped,
I wouldn't have a job.
right? And so for me, it's about making sure there's longevity, and that when I am one day like Peter, and sitting at when I'm a CEO,
when he's a CEO,
when I'm a CEO,
he's putting it out there.
I'm not gonna. I don't want to have the concern of that gap in my talent in the company that I might be leading, and so I would rather put in the work now to stop that from happening. So I think to summarize it all the way down is that I want there to be excitement, interest, without people having to fall into the space. I want people to come here to look at insurance on the outside and be like, I want to be there. I want to be a broker. I want to be a claims person. I want to be an operations manager within an insurance company. And so what am I doing to...
Or a content creator.
Yeah, or a content creator.
For marketer at an insurer. There's so much opportunity.
There's so many opportunities. And what am I doing to sort of make that happen? I mean, I started with the claims forum to get excitement pumped into the claims space, where, claims is considered the drain of the company, right? But to change that now, to change the perception of claims, and also to create some excitement around young professionals coming in. Lawyers, I mean, LLB students who don't have articles, there's other routes you can take within the insurance space.
Wow.
And people don't know these things at university. I certainly didn't know it. I had a very linear view.
So you actually tend to fall into those career paths.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah, exactly. So it's doing that, starting with those small steps of the claims forum, and then just sort of speaking it and living it every day, and being an example to other leaders coming into the business and other young individuals coming into the space as well. I can go on and on and on.
Chris, you've inspired me.
Yeah.
I mean, I only started getting a fade after the Insurance Apprentice. So I think that was the first thing that you inspired me on. Today, I don't have it. I'm growing it out a little bit. Okay, so just we're getting old. So some of us are balding. Peter, what is the burning desire to change in your heart?
I'm glad you mentioned claims. In a lot of companies, it's seen as the sort of backroom guys. But I put it as forward, is your advisor is there for show, claims is for go. It's the theory versus the practice. So in actual fact, your best practitioners are in the claims area because they make the sales pitch reality. And I think in many organizations, it's time to elevate the position of claims to where it should be.
100%.
Guys talk about it as being the shop window, but you wouldn't say so in terms of organizational structures. That's one of the things that I would agree. 100% we need to change.
I started in claims.
And it's the best place to learn exactly what the practice is, what you're actually there for. So I support that. I think for me, it's that people would see that our industry has a significant role to play in society. That's one of the areas where independent intermediaries employ people. Corporates and government don't really. So I'm a great advocate of independent financial intermediaries because we can employ people and change lives. And I think everyone, including the regulator, should ensure that it's easier for that to happen. Because if we do, it changes the dynamics of our industry. Instead of, at the moment, there's consolidation because many people don't see it as a future career. And so you're seeing that whole thing shrink, which I think is the wrong way to go. So I would be encouraging people to try it out. It's, if I look personally, we've had good lives, traveled the world, met lots of different people, good and bad. But it's definitely a career that someone can follow. That would be the thing that I would try to change.
Sure. Guys, it's been amazing, gentlemen. It really was. Having these conversations is why I do this. And you've inspired me, Peter. Although Chris has in the past, you're really using those keys in ways that you probably don't even see sometimes. I think that's amazing. So thank you very much for your time. And I think, Peter, I'm going to close with you, if you don't mind. Any advice for the person entering the industry? What would the number one piece of advice that you would give them?
One of the keys is the Insurance Apprentice. No, it is a key. Seriously.
It is a key, yeah.
But I would also say that you need to balance your hard skills with soft skills because we're in a people's business. Whether you're advising people, whether you're leading teams of people, whether you're inspiring suppliers and service providers to go in the same direction, you need people skills. I'd say don't ignore the people skills.
Excellent. I think the major thing that I've taken away from today is that people matter and supporting those people. And, human resources, there's a human element to it. And I think we mustn't forget that. So thank you very much for your time, guys. Okay. It's been incredible.
Thank you
for having
us.